All right. Welcome back to another episode of the RLR podcast. This is the week of February 28th. Special shout out to Matt's dad. It's his birthday today.
Thanks.
Um,
I'll let him know.
uh, we're back at it again this week. We've got a ton of topics to go over. So we'll probably run through a couple of these pretty quick. Starting with Rolling Start, but for reference, if you're new to the podcast, I'm Nick. Matt's my co host, and we're going to get right into it this week. How are you, Matt?
I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. How about you?
I can only say the same right now. So
Good to talk with you again, buddy.
yeah,
When are we gonna roll on into rolling start?
yeah. So
You want to hit us
as
off?
yeah, as longtime listeners will know, we can't go a single week without talking about Porsche, as Matt and I are both Porsche fanboys.
It's law by now.
Yeah,
That's a
at
written
this point
law.
it's tradition. We're not going to break tradition. Um, Porsche, the Panamera is getting some updates. Um, it stylistically, it's a little bit of change. Some fender work and
Mm-hmm.
the full rear tail light, kind of matching the
Full
911.
bar.
Yep,
Yeah,
matching the 911, the Taycan.
like the
So
full LED light. Like I mean, everyone's going frankly like a full LED light strip at this point, though, right? I love the trend. I mean, I love it,
yeah,
but it's
I
about
think
time.
it looks great, and I think from a safety standpoint, you can see the full width of
Yeah,
whatever vehicle you're
it's a
following.
pretty wide
So
car too, so it's a
yeah,
lot of purchase area to put lights on. You know.
yeah. So I
What
think
about something that
overall
you
it's
found?
good.
What about like engine powertrain updates or anything like that? Is it just like interior, exterior? Is there any powertrain updates? Did you see?
Um, not anything too insane. Um, I know
I
that
mean, there's a million models of the Panamera, right? So,
yeah. So we've
and if you
got
go to Porsche's website, you can I don't even know how many, but you can keep scrolling through just there's tons of different trims on with the Panamera.
yeah
It's
anything
pretty
from
insane.
the so we've got the base, the 4 executive, the 10 years edition, the 4S, the 4 10 years edition, the 4S executive, the GTS, the turbo executive. Then you get into the hybrid models and yada 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 yada.
It keeps
Um,
going.
yeah, I don't expect any crazy trim levels to be changing that much. It's still going to have a twin turbo V8 available. It's still going to have a hybrid setup. I believe this one will have a plug-in hybrid option, though, kind of moving in line with the Taycan, even though the Taycan is getting the cross truck or
Hmm.
the I don't want. It's definitely not a crossover. I think we've decided it is a wagon.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
the
Oh
Taycan
yeah.
will be getting the wagon. Speaking of which, real quick, I know it's not on the list, but did you see that the new Taycan is going to have adjustable suspension, so you can raise it and go off road with it?
I did not, but that sounds interesting. It seems a little heavy to go off road with, doesn't it?
It does. It definitely does. So,
I wonder how many discerning Porsche customers are going to be taking their Taycans off road. My money's on not a lot.
my guess would be not a lot either, but it's one of those capability things. Similar to when
Yeah.
you and I went to the Chicago Auto Show and they put us in a Land Rover Discovery, and they we discovered the capabilities of it. But when have you ever seen a Discovery, a modern Discovery in the Chicagoland area anywhere else but a Starbucks parking lot?
Yeah, pretty much.
So,
Yep. Yep.
you brought up the new Lexus IS.
Yeah, Lexus. I do appreciate my Lexus stuff, despite the quirks and as Doug DeMiro would say, quirks and features of various Lexus models. But they released a new sports sedan in the sports sedan segment, the IS 500, which looks exactly like an IS 350, but it has V8, and it seems like based on the specs coming from this new release, it's got essentially all of the sport packages, all of the add-ons that you could get with an IS350, and it kind of pretty much starts there. So it's definitely sportier. Those, I mean, one thing that if you like Lexus, you get a little, in my opinion, a little worried about is their performance models. It's almost like, is there any true F Sport models anymore? I think technically there's only one Lexus model left, which actual real F car, which is I think the RC Coupe or Coupe. And I mean, what most people by now, I think, forget that Lexus even ever made like the glorious sounding LFA, right? So
Well, I
it,
and
it,
it's funny that you mentioned that because I was just watching a documentary on the LFA this past week, and
I mean, you forget that it's a constant worry of them just slapping the F badge and like with sport packages to look sporty on their hybrids and all this stuff. You forget that I worry. I think a lot of people like, where is the performance end of Lexus going? And it looks like, based on the V8 that this has, it doesn't look like it's you know, it looks great, right? It looks great. I think it sounds great. It's great performance and it's needed. I think it's actually the only V8 in the segment in which it competes, along with along the likes of. Let me do a quick searching here.
so I'm
What
looking
would
at
this
it
would it would
on my
compete
end.
with? I think the M340i, the Audi S4, Mercedes AMG G4 or C43. But I think it's the only one with a V8 in the group. So
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, it definitely also seems like with what they put on. I think they released it a couple of days ago, earlier in the week. It definitely doesn't seem like the top end. It seems like they left some more room for a quote unquote monster version of it, which should be hopefully soon to come, based on what I've been reading about. It's not a full fat F model, quote unquote, but it's pretty it's more of an F than something they've already had
It's not a
before.
full blown F model, but it's an F Sport, which is kind of like having
But
the
it's an
M
actual
Sport.
F Sport. I think
Yeah.
that's the big difference. Is it's an actual F Sport model, whereas like every other F Sport besides the RC Coupe is F Sport appearance packages and stuff like that. This actually has more capability, a better engine, blah blah blah. So seems like there's the performance is not yet dead at Lexus, which I'm happy to see, and hopefully we'll see what the full F of this particular model will look like. So
Hmm.
I think I can't help but think, I love red, and the press, quote unquote, the press color, whatever this red color is, it just looks like it looks
It
gorgeous.
does look good. I'm looking at it right now.
I will
Um,
say I do not like the tailpipes, so I don't like the stacked on top of each other diagonal kind of thing, but
that's kind of the F
I could
style
get
though.
past it. Yeah, I never really liked it, but I could for the engine that this thing boasts, I could most certainly forget about it. And I love the wheels on the press car. I love them. I think they're really cool. So it's worth a look. So yeah, it's I think it's a good thing. Lexus is still pumping out some performance out of the luxury car makers. So happy to see it, frankly. I don't know if anybody else really, like, if you care as much as I do, but you know that I drive a Lexus, and I think that they make some darn good cars, and people tend to drive them for quite a while. So I'm a good example of that, and I'm happy to see performance still coming out of Lexus. So
Yeah, I it definitely looks good. I've never been a huge fan of the big grills, and that's actually going to be part of our next topic too.
I don't
Um,
mind it anymore. I think that's the Lexus styling now. And as long as they make them, the headlights and the front
it's
fascia
grown
with
on
that
me
grill
a little.
aggressive, I think Lexus does a great job on their F Sport and some their couple now F models, actual F Sport models and the appearance packages. I think they do a decent job to a good job of making them look aggressive, and given the size of Lexus grills, right, on all their ranges, it's that like what kind of like in out diagonal triangle square rectangle thing, whatever it is. I like it when it's aggressive, when it has the I've seen some grills on some models where it's like just a few quote unquote bars or lines in the grill, and that just makes it look even bigger, in my opinion. But if you look at the press car for the IS 500, there's a lot of like mesh in the grill, and I think that makes it look better when they kind of fill the space. So
Yeah.
to that point, though, I also don't mind the bigger grills on BMWs. I think that's what you're going to bring up next, right? I personally don't mind them for now, frankly. We'll see if
Um,
they get any bigger.
Yeah, I'm on the fence about it right now.
You found something that from BMW on that, right?
Yeah, so BMW, this was just a quick hit. BMW's justification for the enormous kidney grills is we want something that stands out in a crowd. I thought BMWs kind of did that already, but maybe I'm mistaken. And I know, at least over in the states, they do. I know in
I
other
mean, I
countries,
guess yeah, I
they're
guess it stands out in a crowd. I mean,
it definitely does stand out
I
in a
guess.
crowd. Just essentially when everybody said we don't like the big grills, they said, "Well, it stands out, and that's what we were going for. So there's your answer." And everybody went, okay."
Yeah.
So, just interesting little tidbit there.
Moving
Um,
along the lines, the United States Postal Service looks like it's finally selected its new trucks,
yeah,
and they're kind of weird
they
looking.
are well, but then again, if you think about at least the current selection back,
Hmm.
depending on where you are in the country, and I mean, there's a lot of different things some mail carriers use. Uh,
Yeah.
custom left-hand drive Buick Sentries still.
Hmm.
Um,
I guess, but what one would think of like the typical boxy,
yeah,
short
current.
front end,
So
USPS truck, right?
right, the current version was developed by Northrop Grumman. Yes, the same Northrop Grumman that made military jets has was making uh, the current generation mail truck. Another military defense contractor has been handed over the rights to building the new trucks, and that is Oshkosh.
Yep.
So, for those of you who may not recognize the Oshkosh name immediately, they're the ones who build the MRAPs, the mine resistant and was it mine resistant anti personnel or something
Something like that.
something like that.
The big
Essentially,
personnel carriers that can withstand IED blasts
yeah,
and keep on going.
yep. Oshkosh also happens to own the Pierce Fire Truck Company, so the largest fire truck manufacturer in North America. Um, just as a side note, there.
And I've been reading about this stuff, and it looks like it's a very weird design, like tall windshield, a very tall truck, very like kind of, I would say it's a cross between if you took a USPS, standard brown mail carrier with the current USPS trucks and then modernized everything a little bit. That's what I think it looks like. And from what I'm reading about it, it sounds like the quote unquote the NGDV, the next generation delivery vehicle, is really it's so weird because of all the design constraints that the US Postal Service had on it with, step heights and ride heights, the size of the glass and vision angles and, roof height and all this stuff. So it sounds like, whoever was submitting entries for this design process, I mean, they were very much restricted to be considered, within the quote unquote rules. So I think it's a good look. I mean, it's if it's got to be weird, I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's a USPS next gen USPS mail carrier, right? Like
Yep.
kind of is what it is. So I don't think we'll be seeing them, frankly, anytime soon on the road, but they will be coming for sure. I'm not sure. I don't see a. I just see a deliver like a, you know, field date kind of thing, Nick. Or I didn't see anything about a,
I didn't see anything about an actual.
estimated fielding date.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything about delivery dates or anything like that. So, but
Well,
interesting.
some more automotive news that and actually not over the past week, but some stuff I saw today actually was apparently Hyundai is doing an EV recall on the Kona, I think specifically, and from the sound of it, it's potentially the most expensive recall in history. It looks like the some of Hyundai's electric vehicles have caught on fire, and as those who may know with EVs and batteries, it's not good when batteries catch on fire because they keep going, they keep burning. Um, so especially if they're what lithium batteries, right? But apparently, since 15 have caught on fire, there's a global recall for 82,000 of its vehicles, which I mean, sound and apparently the recall I'm reading an article from Jalopnik from Elizabeth Blackstock, and apparently it sounds like the recall is going to cost a total of quote 1 trillion Korean won, or about $900 million per CNN. That's a lot of money. Makes an average cost per car of about $11,000, which is practically unheard of. And I guess
Huh.
could be an issue with EVs being the norm is, for at least for the time being, they're more expensive to create until I guess economies of scale is reached, right? So
Well, and
there
beyond
it's not
that,
as cheap.
almost every single one is using a lithium battery.
Yeah, I mean we've had so long to perfect all of the manufacturing processes and the combust, the technology for internal combustion and all this stuff. Like we've reached the quote unquote peak of economy of scale, one could say, right? We're not there for EVs, so a normal recall for Ford trucks or for Dodge whatever's, or like normal, those first popped in my head, but normal recalls there are still expensive and bad, but you know, automakers weigh the costs and the benefits of, leaving, I think, vehicles out on the road, or how much it's going to cost a recall and how big is a safety issue and blah, blah, blah. You might not have that chance with EVs, right? Like, fires are a huge deal, even more so than one could argue, seatbelts maybe not working properly. And it's a huge deal too, right? But what one could say potentially uncontrollable fires are a little bit different than some other safety issues in cars, not
Right.
to mention the cost of EVs. All I can say is it sounds like it's a new world with EVs for a lot of reasons. So I found that very interesting. And I'm not sure what kind of financials are behind Hyundai. Big manufacturer, obviously, but it still sounds, well, frankly, not good. Any auto recall is not good.
Right.
And this one doesn't sound good as well. So we'll have to see what happens. If we see any other news, I think we'll see what happens. But yeah, batteries.
Yeah, we'll
When
keep an
there's
eye
issues
on
in
this one
batteries,
for sure.
batteries aren't cheap. Another thing
Yep.
I saw too with a car manufacturer, not a recall, but interesting, is as Jaguar Land Rover is apparently cutting its capacity by 25% over the next 5 years. Apparently, in an investor meeting, this was relayed to investors, and I find that kind of interesting. Looks like they're making cuts. Obviously, I'm not sure if it's because of costs or whatnot, but it could be something with they don't need as much production mass with their shift to all electric. But over the next 5 years, much like their all electric shift, it looks like they're going to be cutting capacity by 25%, which is a pretty big deal, frankly. Yeah, looks like Jaguar is going to be
Huh.
all electric by 2025. Land Rover will be following suit by 2039, and
And
it
with
looks
that,
like,
they're knocking back production.
yeah, that's what it says here. It says, I'm not sure if it's related specifically to the change, but that's what I'm reading here on just popped up on my news feed
Interesting.
from Jalopnik. It could be because as they shift production into more EV focus, maybe they don't need certain means of production elsewhere, right? I'm not 100% sure how all that works, but apparently there's an individual named Belor. I don't know who he is. So, oh, it says the new CEO, Thierry Belor, announcing that Jaguar Land Rover's break-even point in terms of car sales has been lowered from 600,000 to 400,000. So, if you have the flexibility to rework your operation, now's a good time to do it. I can't argue with that logic, right? Apparently, per him, it was a matter of scale and speed to go to market. So it does sound like it's related to their electric shift. So
Hmm.
it's a new world with trends and shifts in the auto industry for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow,
Um.
interesting stuff.
Yeah. Definitely.
You speaking of interesting stuff, it seems like you found a new car. That's
Yeah. I don't
interesting.
know. I don't necessarily know how new or in general how long it's been being worked on. But Gordon Murray, for those of you who don't know the name immediately, Gordon Murray is the guy who, for McLaren Motorsports and McLaren Automotive in general, was the lead designer on the McLaren F1 street car. Huge
I
name,
mean,
was the fastest car in the world for a long time. Is still today one of the most expensive vehicles in the world and one of the most rare vehicles in the world.
yep,
Um,
iconic styling, center seat. I mean,
yep.
it goes on.
Yeah. So he has come up, and he had released some images before of. So he is now running Gordon Murray Automotive. Um, they have the T50 hypercar, which is essentially very close to the F1 of
Yeah.
1995.
I think I saw it and it looks like a very much updated F1, which isn't a bad thing. I would say it's a
Not
good thing.
not a bad thing. It's got very Porsche-esque headlights. It has 3 seats with a center-mounted driver seat, just like the old F1 did. It is called the T50, but the big news was the announcement of the T50S Niki Lauda edition. That's another big name in automotive history. Niki Lauda, the extremely famous and extremely talented late F1 driver. Um, his name
Yeah.
and signature is on the car. It is a V12 powered version of the T50, which has a very beautiful red line of 12,000 RPM,
Can't
which
wait to
means
hear
that this
that.
thing is going to scream like an F1 car, at least back in the heyday of F1. I'm
Yeah,
extremely excited to hear this thing actually,
I can't wait to hear it,
you know,
man.
moving about and starting up. The road going version, the standard T50, I believe they said was right around, what did they say? So it's 9,000 RPM. Still a
Oh,
V12.
only 9,000, right? Only nine.
Only 9,000. Well, when we're talking about F1 cars, that above 10,000 range is when everything really started happening.
Yeah.
So, the other quick note about it, we'll have individual switches for all of the traction aids and safety. So if you're taking this out to a track, you will be able to physically flip a switch, and it will completely, and not just in your head, but completely turn off the traction control, the automatic dampers, the you
That's
name it,
cool.
all
Have
on
total
a
control over the car, over
uh,
what you want to do.
yep, all on a driver-oriented center stack, which will be very, very interesting. It also has the F1 style steering wheel where you hold on to both sides, and it's got about 180 degrees of rotation from end to end, and you just hold on and let the car do the work. So,
You hold on and have fun in your rocket ship for the road,
yep,
frankly.
yep.
That's cool.
So,
It's worth a look. I like it in orange, and I think it looks pretty cool. So I can't wait to hear what that thing sounds like. It's gonna be awesome.
yeah. So, another thing, we had talked about this last week with Ford and the F 150 hybrids powering homes.
Yeah, I think
Um,
if you don't mind, I think I want to. I know we put stuff in order. I think I want to hit the Ford one first, and then go into the Tesla one because I
yeah,
think
absolutely. Yep.
it shows one side versus the other, right? We when Zach was on the podcast from Shooting Cars last week, the episode, we had talked about I believe you know how a man in Texas here when they went through their power outages and so on, he was using his new Ford F-150 and the generator feature to power his home and his neighbors' appliances and so on. And apparently, I was almost it was strange. Almost immediately after we had wrapped up that episode, and we were talking just amongst the three of us, Nick, myself, and Zach. Apparently, Big Ford, had asked other when they saw that they had asked other Texas dealerships to loan out F-150s with that Pro Power generator onboard generator to be used in the same capacity. So, not it looks like that was per I think a Texas news station. I can't remember the news station that I got that from. But it looks like a number of the dealers were loaning out these F-150s to do the exact same thing. And I mean, what what an amazing help. It doesn't seem like it was, marketing at all. It seems like it was altruistic and very much real. So can't tip our hats to Ford there and the dealerships that were doing so, because it's a great invention, right? And clearly it helped with Texas families. So yeah.
Yeah. Um, so that being said,
the
uh,
other on the other side of that.
on the other side of things, now Teslas, unlike so actually the Hyundai Kona EV has the same kind of output generator that the F-150 has but on a smaller scale.
Hmm.
The Tesla does not, but some people were modifying their Tesla or trying to plug appliances into their Tesla just to get them to run. Apparently, that voids your warranty with Tesla, so keep that in mind. If I believe
That's interesting.
majority of Texas is getting back to normal,
Yeah, it seems like things
or
are,
at least
they
some
had
some
a
form of
thaw as
normalcy.
well.
Um, we're happy to hear that things are
Why would
returning
that
to normal,
void
but
the warranty though? I mean,
the it is not it
modification of the cars, I guess,
modification,
right?
yes, but it apparently is clearly marked that you are not allowed to power external or use the power from the vehicle for external applications. That it does void the warranty of the car.
Huh. Well, interesting. Huh. I frankly wonder why. I mean,
It
if
does
it
put a
worked,
lot of stress on the batteries when you do stuff like that. So
yeah.
I know I'm sure that's part of the big reason, but
I mean, even more reason, I guess, would be, obviously if it's, I think you said it before, they're not necessarily, the same thing. An EV doesn't just mean it's a, you know, just a battery. Frankly, it's different. So an electric vehicle is not the same thing as a generator. So I guess interesting.
yeah.
That's kind of weird. But I get. I mean, could you? I can't blame them though for trying. Or I can't blame people for seeing that, and
Well,
anything that would help, right? Frankly, so does it make
exactly.
anything that would help in that situation for Texans across the state? So
Yeah.
yeah, moving.
Uh,
I think another
just
thing.
I just want to
Another.
touch on this one real quick.
Oh, dude. Yeah,
Don't
this one.
I have to put a disclaimer out there. Don't don't go to his social medias. Don't send hate his way. However, Justin Bieber decided to completely ruin, in our opinion, a Rolls Royce by sending it to
Without question.
without question, by sending it to West Coast Customs, and it came back as one of the ugliest monstrosities I have ever seen. Personal
I don't even
opinion.
think I could even attempt to describe what this thing looks like. So, and I don't think we could share the picture, via the podcast. So definitely use googling skills and social media, whatever. Go take a look at this thing, and it's yeah. Don't bring any hate anybody's way. We're just, I think, like I said,
I
both saying that
just
it's
want to know.
terrible.
I just want to know, how do you turn the wheels?
I just want to know, how do you take something that's so beautiful
Well, yeah,
and then ruin it? Just plain ruin it. I mean,
it.
oh my gosh,
In
it's
my
terrible.
personal opinion, it looks like hot garbage. But I
I
don't
I
know
would
what else
agree.
to
I
expect
wanted
out of
that
the
too. How
guys.
do you get at the wheels? Where? How did I don't understand. How do they turn? I mean, I don't know. I have no clue. The front is, oh, I just can't stand it. It's for
Well,
those who are I'm looking at a picture of it right now, and it's just
I
it's it's a box. It's just a box. It's terrible. It really is.
yeah, it is an
It really
absolute
is.
abomination. I'm surprised that Rolls Royce has not sent Justin Bieber a cease and desist, because they love to do stuff like that.
I don't know, man. It's, I guess if you have enough. I mean, it's his car, right? He has an
Yeah,
successfully and
but
do whatever he wants. But I
we
mean,
may need to dive into this topic, uh, because even though it's his car and technically he can do whatever he wants with it, Rolls Royce is not shy about handing out cease and desist orders for things that make their brand not look desirable.
it's a
Um,
good point.
the owner of the white Rolls Royce that was in Post Malone's, I believe it was Rockstar video,
Mm-hmm.
got a cease and desist from
Oh, then I'm sure he will.
Rolls Royce, saying that the fact that Post Malone was standing on the hood of that vehicle went against everything that they stood for, and that they reserved the rights to potentially take legal action or remove the Rolls Royce from the owner. Which
That's interesting. Even if you pay for, I mean, I guess you must sign a contract, even if you pay for the car in full. I guess.
he
Huh?
Post Malone was on
How would that work?
a podcast talking about it. I'll have to dig further into that. We might have to talk about
Yeah,
that
maybe
later.
that's something we hit next week. That's
Yeah.
for now. We'll have to see what happens because I think this is a monstrosity that goes against Rolls
Yeah,
Royce,
this is
Royce in general.
absolutely, in my personal opinion, disgusting.
Yeah, it's well, let's not harp on that. I think the listeners know how we feel. Frankly, it's
Yeah,
hot garbage. But at the end of the day, it's his car, and we'll have to see what if there's any action on behalf of Rolls Royce. So I'm eager to see if anybody sees anything. Please let us know. Reach out to us. It's definitely we'll keep our eye on that as well. Um, Moving along here to kind of cap off Rolling Star, we got a few more things I want to talk about. We apparently there's a new way of leasing the Ford Mach E. That is their electric, and I hate to say it, but their electric quote unquote Mustang. As those who are listeners should know that we don't think it's a Mustang, frankly, me and
I was
myself.
very upset by their recent commercial
Yeah,
and
that's I'm not going to go into
recent
that. I don't want to
yeah
be upset for too long, but
yeah.
apparently there's an interesting way that Ford is leasing out the new Mach-E that I think is worth mentioning. That's supposed to actually help the consumer. So, Tesla kind of paved the way for, I guess, leasing and kind of like doing stuff online and not having to go to a dealership, give or take, right? Arguably, and apparently the Ford is leasing these Mach E's in a very Tesla like way, where you put down like an initial deposit about like $500. This is an example of like someone who even bought one at like after the launch event a long time ago. But and then apparently like you have to wait 2 years almost to get the dang thing, right? But apparently it's how this user, his name is he's Alex from the Alex on Auto's YouTube channel. Apparently, from what he says in his video, he was able to lease it through Ford. So it's not a traditional lease where you would go to a bank and no, sorry, that's financing. It's not a traditional lease. So he borrows the money basically from Ford like a loan, and Ford then agrees to buy the car back from you at a certain price if you meet all the contractual stipulations, and I'm assuming like probably mileage and care and so on. And it also then allows Ford to give the lessee the entire $7,500 tax credit, which isn't always the case with traditional leases. Generally, I think sometimes you only might get that traditionally if you're financing the car. So it sounds like Ford's basically making the best of trying to get these vehicles into people's hands. And I think doing it in a pretty smart way that actually helps people, in terms of the long run for on their wallet. So that's my general understanding of how it works, and I can't really go more into specifics, but I think I kind of get it, and it sounds like a good idea. I mean, frankly, if nothing else, it sounds like a good way to make it even a little bit cheaper than a traditional lease, and Ford can then, like I say, give the lessee all of the tax benefits because there is an act going through U.S. Congress right now. I think it's called the Green Act. It's the Green Act bill. I think Teslas no longer qualify for that $7,500 tax credit, but the Mach E's still do. I don't know why, but I think I remember reading that a couple of weeks ago. So I don't know. We'll
Interesting.
see how this. I'd hate to say that this would put more Mach E's out on the road, but I also can't fault Ford for doing something that sounds like really smart. So, I don't know how I feel about it, frankly. How about you, Nick? Any thoughts?
Um, it I have not had the chance to dig into it further. Um,
And frankly,
but
it seems pretty vague. Like from what I'm reading, I like there's a good website, insideevs.com, which is I think it's really good, especially for for obviously electric vehicle news. And this is something that just caught my eye. It was an article written by Michael Cantu on February 19th, 2021. and it's interesting. I have not yet watched Alex from Alex on Auto's YouTube channel video about it. I think he specifically talks about it, so I might have to go check that out because it's interesting. Frankly, it sounds like a smart idea, but I'm not quite sure how it frankly fully works. It's kind of weird, but
Yeah, I I don't necessarily. I mean, I guess if they're promising to buy the vehicle back, what's so different about that from a normal lease? Beyond you being able to get the tax credit instantly instead of waiting for it on your tax returns. But that's
yeah, I think that's the one thing I don't get either. Is based on what the article's talking about, I don't see. Yeah, I technically don't see how it's different. If anything, it sounds like a cross between financing and a lease, but Ford's the bank. I don't really know, frankly. It's interesting.
yeah, that is
I don't know.
interesting.
I don't know enough to speculate further, but I thought it was interesting enough to bring up. Hopefully, people will get jazzed
Well,
up about it.
because this will lead into our next topic, the only reason I say that is my parents are currently leasing their CX-5 from Mazda, and
Hmm.
Mazda's the bank on that one. It's Mazda
Yeah,
Capital.
yeah,
So, and I know Ford's got Ford Capital. So it's just
yeah.
interesting from that point. We'll have to check into that. Maybe we'll talk about
Well,
that next week as
speaking
well.
of Mazda, I was I like to read articles on Road and Track, and apparently, I looked it up on Consumer Reports, and yeah, so we had talked about how Porsche was on the top of the 2021 Consumer Reports rankings, and that looks like along with BMW, Subaru, Porsche, and Honda round out the top five. You might be wondering who's number one on the 2021 Consumer Reports list of best overall auto brands, and apparently it's Mazda, based on the on an annual a reliability survey. It looks like Mazda is ranked number one on the 2021 Consumer Reports best overall auto brands, which I think is I can't disagree. I see like Zach from Shooting Cars. I'd see him talk about it in his videos. I know your guys' history with Mazdas. I've driven a few here and there. I think they have great styling on a lot of their models. I mean, and I can't speak to the reliability of one. I've never owned one personally,
I mean,
or but I
I only
doesn't
had
sound like
bad
it's
luck
bad.
with a Mazda that
You
was
had a very
bad.
specific old issue. But this sounds obviously more recent, but it looks like Frank. It looks like Consumer Reports recommends all seven of the Mazda models that it tested. It looks like
Oh,
it's
absolutely. Yeah,
it's a
nowadays
combination of them.
nowadays it's fantastic. I also have to take into consideration that the Mazda that I had an issue with, it was a 2007 Speed 3, was a Speed, and it was pretty decently modified. So that's not a stock vehicle.
Yeah,
I just, because I can look out the window right now and look at Zach's
I
Mazda
mean
3,
it's a
and
great example, right?
it's a base 3 hatch, and it's got Apple CarPlay. It's got, um, you know, standard leather seats. It's got,
Safety features, highway. I think what
yeah,
radar cruise.
it's got
I mean,
radar cruise
I
control,
think that's what I
blind
was
spot
reading
monitoring,
the.
lane keep. It's got all in the base
Well,
model.
that's why. I mean,
Yeah,
what Zach's
absolutely.
talked about before, I've seen it in person as well, and other, and we went to the auto show the last one, I think a couple years ago now, for with after 2019, I think actually, so we couldn't go 2020, right? Um,
No, we were actually
oh, did we go
it was the
2020?
last thing we did before 2020, before the lockdown.
Oh, you're right. We did go. Okay, that's right. So I think it was there, and we went with Zach, and I was thoroughly impressed with a lot of the Mazda models. And I mean, yeah, it seems like it's they're fun to drive. They're high quality. They're reliable. All the bells and whistles you get, even at a base model, styling is great. I mean, reasonable prices. I mean, it's just they're killing it right now,
That's right.
frankly. And
We did go with Zach, and I was trying to remember. Did we go with him? And then I remember him grilling the poor model at the RX-7 display or the MX-5 display
yeah.
about rotaries and Mazda classics, and that poor woman did not know what was about to hit her. She
Oh,
did her
oh
best,
God.
but
Yeah, I mean that was
for
a little,
for those of you
but
who
yeah.
don't know, a lot of those car manufacturers hire models,
Mhm.
like supermodels, to stand in the booths and wear their clothing, and they teach them a little bit about which car they're standing in front of, but
Probably enough to get by to your average, you know,
yeah,
individual.
and then anything
Not
further than that, they go
necessarily like
grab a sales manager from one of the local dealerships that's providing some of the cars there.
mm-hmm.
This poor woman, Zach, would just started grilling her on
Yeah,
rotary engine things,
she was
and
great though.
she
She
handled it
tried.
extremely well, and
She was good.
yeah, I think it was Zach,
It's
and it was Zach's second time because he went earlier and then he came back
yeah.
with us.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he was
So
he went his second visit with us.
yeah,
I don't know, man. I can't help but agree. Like I said, I don't have extended experience with Mazda cars like maybe you or Zach do, but from an outsider's opinion, I agree with the with the results. So I can't imagine what it's like from someone who has a vested interest in Mazda, right? With
yeah.
it as an owner or a leaser.
Having driven both Zach's 3 and my parents' CX-5, I, and both of which are newer. I think both are 2019s. Um, yeah, there's I have no complaints. Um,
Yeah,
Zach's 3 is
interesting.
extremely comfortable. My parents' CX-5 is also extremely comfortable. Both have held up very well. Zach's is a base model. My parents is a touring because it was before they had the Grand Touring Edition. So
Hmm.
my parents have the top model for their year. But yeah, I mean everything in them gorgeous, well put together.
Let's see if they
Sound
can stay on top. It's their game to lose, right?
exactly. So
Well, another maybe last couple things here in let's start is apparently Jeep is having an argument with the Cherokee Nation over the name of their Cherokee SUV.
Cherokee,
Apparently, from what
Grand
I've been
Cherokee.
reading.
So in the nicest possible way, Ford told, or I'm sorry, not Ford. Jeep told them to uh, open themselves up for discussion about it. Uh, that they were looking forward to open and honest dialogue with the Cherokee Nation. But yeah,
Hmm.
essentially, um, the Cherokee Native Americans are upset about the name of the Cherokee. They don't believe that it does.
Apparently, they're upset about the name and that they're that the Jeep is profiting greatly off of that nameplate and not honoring the Cherokee Nation. And I mean, it seems like Jeep is their answer seems like they're trying to pass it off that they care, but frankly, it seems like a really bad way to say no. I don't have any skin in the game, but I don't know what this is going to end up as. I frankly usually I think this things like this and renamings and not in the auto industry but everywhere just with whatever, right? Any industry, anything, schools or sports teams or whatever. Seems like usually there's a name change coming down the pipeline, right? But I don't know. I feel like Jeep is really sticking to its guns and, not it's really doesn't seem like they want to budge. I'm not saying if they should or shouldn't. I not it's not my place to speak on this matter, frankly, beyond, my personal thoughts as the situation I think develops. I don't know. It seems like yeah, they said they're open to like, discussion or to dialogue, but I don't know. It doesn't really sound like it's much of a negotiation, frankly. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm not saying I agree with one side or the other, but you know, the not the quotes. Well, what would it be? I can't think what the word is. Like the points that made by the Cherokee Nation's principal chief, which who is Chuck Hoskin Jr., I believe is his name from what I'm reading. Like I can't argue with him, frankly. I don't know. I'm sure that Jeep is not trying. They're not malicious in their intent at all. I don't believe that for a second, and it hasn't been. I don't think that's been said. I'm just saying in general. I just don't know how this dialogue is gonna evolve. Frankly, we'll have to see what happens.
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, this is definitely something we'll have to see what how the talks evolve over time.
yeah. And how much of an issue are they willing to bring this up as? We'll
Yeah,
definitely
and
we'll definitely
yeah,
be following it.
it looks like that. Like I said, Jeep's open to dialogue. Talks haven't broken down yet. So I mean, well, who knows? That's well, let's say hypothetically, if Jeep does change the name, I mean, the Jeep Cherokee is grand. The Jeep Cherokee and the Grand Cherokee is a huge deal, right? Like that is a long standing lineage,
Yeah,
frankly. That's a famous name. Obviously, it's a famous name. So
it's one of their
I don't
tops.
know.
I mean, it is. I think right now it is their top selling nameplate between the Grand Cherokee and the Cherokee.
We'll
So
have to see what happens if they leave the name or what happens. So yeah.
yeah,
Last thing I want to talk about is Washington State. So quick reference, we talked about EVs a lot on here, but given recent news, and we had talked a while ago on a previous episode that California is committed to a statewide mandate of for all new vehicles to be electric by 2035. 15 years sounds like a long time, 2020 quote unquote, but apparently the state of Washington is even pushing that further. They want to do the same thing by 2030, which is technically 9 years from now, 10 years. That sounds you know yeah. It's actually I'm wrong. Apparently, hang on, I'm reading my notes here. I took notes. I read the article earlier. Notes. Apparently, it's not just 20. It's not 2030. It's 2029. I think from what I'm reading and that I wrote down. I could be wrong, but I think based on what I'm reading, apparently it calls for all 2030 model year cars to fall under this mandate. So I get it. So 2030 is the year, but that actually means that 2029 versions of cars would also technically need to be like zero emissions EVs, that kind of thing. So their state of Washington in the US is really pushing up their timeline, frankly. Um, that seems,
yeah, that's
9 years doesn't seem like a long time away, frankly. That's I don't know. We'll have to again. I think we've said it before in this episode. It is a quick. It's an ever-changing landscape in the automotive industry right now, and probably for quite some time.
yeah,
Looks like there's some bills that obviously still need to pass, but that's what proposed bills going through the Washington state legislation right now say. So we'll see. I
yeah,
hope they can do it. I mean, I'm all for. I think we're all for it. If it can be done right and the infrastructure's there and so on, let's do it. I just don't know what it's gonna look like. So we'll see. Yeah,
definitely we'll see.
I think that's it for Rolex Start. We went ahead and do paddock chat now.
Absolutely,
We definitely
it's
have some
been
automotive news
some
or some
motorsports news.
motorsports news. Yeah, rather. We saw some car releases this week. You saw or since last week.
So,
Alpha
uh,
released their car as well as Red Bull. Red
yep,
Bull Red Bull seemed to be a little sneaky about it. Some slight changes. I think Red Bull's livery is good, frankly. I could be a little biased, obviously, but Alpha had they played the Uno card. Basically, they where their car was red looks like it's now white and vice versa. I do have to say though, I think Alpha's had the best release with all the pop and circumstance and the stage coming out of the ground and the music and all that. I really liked watching it live,
that it was
frankly,
a
and
very well put together, very well
yeah.
marketed presentation,
And I gotta say,
and
I like the car. I know that a lot of manufacturers might not be doing big changes this year because of all the stuff coming next year and, huge technological changes for next year's cars, right? But I mean, I like Alpha's livery now. Like it looks like an exact reverse of their previous one, where the old one was kind of like white on red. I kind of like what I'm gonna call as like the red on white, or kind of different thing. So
with
I like it, frankly,
red or blue.
for Alpha. Or
Oh,
yeah, for Alpha, not Red Bull. I'm talking about Alpha.
gotcha.
Alpha's car last year was primarily red with I'd say like 60% white, 40 or red, 40% white. It's like an Uno card, right? They kind of switched it this year where it's
Yes.
where red
Okay,
was
I'm
white,
sorry.
white's not red. I
Because
like it. I
when you
mean,
said Alpha, for a minute I was thinking the AlphaTauri car, and I was
oh
like,
no no no
they
no no.
did do the same thing with the AlphaTauri car. They
Yeah,
flip
and
flopped the
I
white
like
and
that one too. I
blue,
think we
but
talked about it.
what
I
you're
like
talking
the
Alfa Romeo.
yeah. I like the for both of them, frankly. But yeah, I like the flips, especially on the Alfa Romeo car, frankly. Yeah, Red Bull. Like I said, Red Bull. One thing I've been reading is the Red Bull car. There wasn't a whole lot of pop in circumstance. It doesn't seem like a whole lot of changes. There's of course aerodynamic changes in the floors and all that kind of stuff we talked about. But based on what I've been reading, and I won't go into it because I don't feel educated enough to really speculate more on it. Seems like Red Bulls was kind of secretive, and they're being pretty quiet about things. So there could be some surprises maybe down the road in the season potentially. I'm not quite sure, but it seems like Red Bull's been a little bit more quiet than they usually otherwise would be. So we'll see. I don't know, but those are my thoughts on the car releases. We have some upcoming car releases, right? Too. I think Ferrari unveiled their team on the 26th, so you don't get to see their car until I think March 10th. Is it right? Something like that.
Right, and we had
I think
already
they're
known who
technically the
was.
last cars to be.
We already knew who was racing for him. So
Yeah, so I mean, so I don't get the whole like team reveal. I mean, we kind of already knew it. Interesting, but then coming up here soon on the 2nd of March, we have both the Alpine and formerly the artist formerly known as Renault and Mercedes on the March 2nd. We've got
and they
the
they put out a
March.
big tease of the W12 on Twitter.
Oh yeah, they're getting ready for Tuesday. They're getting ready for it.
Yeah,
And Mercedes has killed it at the social media game, so I'm not surprised. We'll see their cars on Tuesday. This being recorded on Sunday this week. The following Wednesday, we get to see British Racing Green back with the Aston Martin car release, and then on the Thursday, we get a Haas livery release, and then to cap it on Friday, we have the Williams car debut on the 5th of March. And the last car would be March 10th, and that's Ferrari. And then we'll be set for the season's cars. So looking forward to it. Got a good
very much.
car release week coming up here. So
Absolutely.
more speculation I've been hearing is apparently Williams might break with the Mercedes engine and move to a Renault engine. And you had made the question. This is not. I don't think it's confirmed. I just read some speculation over the week. You had a good question, Nick. What does that? What could that mean for George Russell then? Frankly.
Being that he has a Mercedes drive, he was brought up by Mercedes in their young drivers program. He is a Mercedes program driver. What
Uh-huh.
does that do to that relationship?
I don't know. I I don't know. I want to see Russell in a Mercedes seat, but I think it's speculation right now. But who knows? Who really knows? There could be. Hey, into the 2022 season, there's a lot of things that are going to change. So we could see some pretty some things kind of turned upside down. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
What else do we have? So we had our first Formula E races on Friday, Saturday.
Yep.
Those for those who aren't know, there's a lot of new rules this year. It's really, I mean, I forgot frankly how interesting it can be with the attack modes and fan boosts, and it's definitely different. It's something that I think you'd have to research to get into, and I frankly I realized after watching Friday's race, I didn't watch Saturday's unfortunately, but I have to re-educate myself, especially with the new changes for the new season. So one thing looks like on Friday, the Mercedes EQ team came out on top finished number one. So surprise, surprise. I don't remember the driver which driver from Mercedes, but
I believe
apparently,
it was Stoffel Van Dorn, the backup driver for Formula One.
Or let me see. But I think you said that you watched the Saturday. There were a couple of crashes and things like a couple of crashes. Everyone was okay on Friday. So I didn't watch the Saturday race, but you did, Nick. And from what I've been reading, there was a huge crash on Saturday. Just goes to show that racing in general is dangerous. I mean, you wouldn't think Formula E just because there's no engines doesn't make it not just as dangerous as Formula One. I mean,
Yeah, well,
some of those
and
a pretty bad crash.
there was a pretty bad accident. And I'll be honest with you, I was watching the race, but I had it on more or less in the background. I've been working on my day job most of this weekend, so I remember looking up and seeing it and seeing the replay. I believe there. I mean, obviously, These cars are it's an FIA certified racing league. So these
Yep.
cars are going to adhere to the same rules
I
and
do have to say real
safety that
quick
F1 does.
before I forget, it was Nick DeVries who was the Mercedes driver who finished first on
That's
Friday.
right. It was yes.
And then for Saturday's winner, that was I'm looking at the Formula E website right now. Looks like that was the Jaguar driver Sam Bird, I believe. So
Yes.
or
Yep.
but
And
yeah, like
and
you're saying, Nick is
Mahindra's it was
yeah.
Lynn,
Mm-hmm.
Alex Lynn from Mahindra,
Oh, that's right.
who
Yep.
was taken to the hospital, but he was conscious. He was talking to all the safety staff.
I
And
haven't seen the crash, but from what I've seen, some like people trackside videos released, and it looks like there were a couple of crash. There's a just something happened out of frame from the videos that I was seeing, and then he saw a couple cars collide. Then all of a sudden he just comes careening past upside down. It was incredible and not in a
yeah,
good
I think
way.
he just caught a bad lip,
Hmm.
and it essentially tipped him right back onto the halo because these cars have the halo just like the F1
I
cars.
mean, if you need
And
any other evidence of why that isn't a piece of needed safety equipment, I mean, yeah. It was a good race. I have to admit, maybe a little shamefully, I was working on, and I gotta say that as I was watching the race on Friday, I turned it on like kind of background noise. I was doing some kind of labor intensive work on Friday, or mentally intensive stuff on Friday, and I found myself I couldn't I had to focus on the race, right? I was getting so into it and like watching, I was so interested that I had to kind of, take my lunch, shall we say, during that time to watch the race, and and I watched the end of it especially in its entirety. So it's uh it's good to have racing back in general. It's great to have Formula E back, and it is interesting. It is worth checking out. I was watching on CBS Sports, I believe, on my from my local
yeah,
cable provider.
in the states, I believe it's CBS Sports. But the one thing I have found has been super helpful is the Formula E app. Um,
Oh yeah,
we're in no way
but, I mean,
sponsored or
I
anything
think
by
they're
them.
very good about. I think that I used to last year or a couple years ago. I was trying to watch there. I think also YouTube as well as some other online locations as well. That's pretty easy. I would say even easier to watch their stuff than even like Formula One,
Yeah,
frankly. So it's worth a watch. We'll be learning alongside all of our listeners here. I think we'll be relearning, frankly, who might be more adequate, more accurate for this year with the rule changes, and we'll be giving our thoughts and right alongside F1 as the races take place. So it's cool to see him back.
yeah,
I think some more stuff, maybe some quick hits. It looks like BWT renewed their partnership with Aston Martin Racing. So that was previously Racing. They were partnered with Racing Point, which is now Aston Martin Racing. So that's good to see there. Another powerhouse signing up with Cognizant Aston Martin Racing. What do we see? Looks like Tag Heuer extended their partnership with the ABB FIA Formula E. So for a multi-year deal, I don't know up until when, but they will continue to be essentially the timer, the timing partner and so on. With this season, we see the Tag Heuer fastest lap as well, so that's cool. Those listeners who have been here for a while know that Nick and I both love our Tag Heuer, so that's good to see. Ferrari is apparently going to be racing again in the WET, the the was it World Endurance Championship, I believe. Am
yes.
I saying that right? In 2023, and I think Ferrari hasn't raced in the WEC in, I want to say, like 40,
It's been
30,
a
30, for like
very long time.
50 years even. Maybe I don't even I frankly I don't even know, to be 100% with you. I don't know how long it's been since they've raced in the WEC, but they're going to apparently. I Let me see if I can find out here. If you want to, yeah, I don't know. Let me see. I have to find out. Make sure I'm getting proper information.
Yeah, so from what I was reading, this is to back up their new hypercar program. As obviously we've had the
Yeah.
LaFerrari out long enough that it is time for Ferrari to create a new flagship, and part of that comes into their racing.
Oh yeah, they're gonna race a new hypercar and that at the WEC in 2023, and apparently they Ferrari hasn't competed at the top level of endurance racing, which includes, of course, the world famous 24 Hours of Le Mans, since 1973. How many years is that? What is that?
Well,
That's 20.
it
That's
will have
48
been
years.
so it'll be 50 years since they've raced by the time 2023 comes
Yeah,
around.
right now that's already 4. You're right. So I think wow, that's a long time. It's good to see him back, but wow, fifth by then, 48 years now, 50 years by then. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, looks like I think you're right. Looks like it's to promote and to get back into the they haven't announced their drivers car category, but I guess they're getting ready for with their teams and so yeah, it's all about the new hypercar. So what would a new Ferrari hypercar look like? Who knows?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Very cool.
I think it's cool. Along, I think last thing here that I think I want to good old Roman Grosjean is back in a race car. Apparently he is back. He's taken his first drive in an Indy car. Apparently Haas pulled his IndyCar sponsorship, and because the owner of Gene Haas didn't want to basically pay for quote. It sounds like something like he was quoted as saying. He had asked if we'd be willing to sponsor him an IndyCar, and I think that at the beginning I was pretty open to it. Haas told Racer magazine or Racer.com, quote, but then when he crashed in Bahrain, I was just so happy he didn't kill himself. For someone who has just absolutely destroyed the car, I couldn't be happier that he survived it. I think it goes on to say that he just didn't want to quote unquote, I guess, pay for him to kill himself. I'm not saying that he would, right? But sounds like I don't know who's now sponsoring Grosjean. I can't remember the team. It's not Haas, obviously, but apparently Grosjean took his first spin in an IndyCar. I think he was saying that he likes the windscreen because for those who don't know, Indy cars are open wheel racers, but they also have a relatively large windscreen on them, whereas F1 cars don't. And apparently it was a cool nuance thing that he wasn't used to, but he enjoyed from what I'm reading. Yeah, it's apparently it's more open and more friendly than an F1 car from what I'm reading an article from gpfans.com, or I read one frankly, and apparently he's got good things to say about an Indy car. So definitely a different kind of racing, but I'm glad to see him back in a race car.
So
I
it
think
looks
we
like he'll
all
be
are.
racing for Dale Coyne.
That's it. Okay, yeah. He says apparently it seems like yeah, it feels different, but he feels good, and I'm happy to hear him say that. Yeah, it's wow, it's good to see him. I'm looking at pictures of the car. What presumably is him in the car. You can see his helmet, right? And it's just good to know that he's back racing. Frankly,
Yeah.
what a comeback! What a recovery! Yeah,
Incredible,
cool.
incredible recovery. So,
Wish you all nothing but the best, Grosjean. Lots of luck. So I think that's all we got. Unless you have anything else from motorsports news, Nick. I think that wraps up Paddock Chat for this week.
I don't have anything else. So,
Well, then let me put my laptop back in my briefcase and head down the jetway.
just don't put it in your carry-on, or else you have to take it out at the FAA, or I'm sorry, not FAA, at the TSA desk. But yes, down the jetway. I'm gonna go through these pretty quick. We're running a little bit behind our schedule today, so
Yeah,
Textron
lots of
Aviation.
news.
Yeah, we have a lot of news here too. Textron Aviation, who owns Cessna and Beechcraft, announced that they are it has been announced that they are working on the new King Air. So the King Air 350 is the current model out. The King Air 360 is going to be the new model, 11 passenger, highly
Hmm.
luxurious, dual turboprop, essentially private jet setter without the jet engines. The expected range is more or less for short hops, New York to
Yeah.
Boston very quickly, but we'll have the range to be able to get from Chicago to Miami when weather permits. So for those who are interested in it, the current King Air 350 has had some range limitations. This is looking to open those up.
Mm.
There has been some pressure on the American FAA to assist in getting a greener aviation fuel out. Av fuel, as everybody knows right now, still contains lead. Um, the Most people know the LL as containing low lead
Hmm.
in the standard aviation fuel, as well as jet fuel. Obviously, has its limitations and its carbon emissions. There's been a lot of talks about getting some new biofuels out there.
I mean, it's
Um,
obviously needed, right? I mean, I think that there were pushes back around, like for FAA pushing as well, back a hard push. I think like 2013 ish era,
yeah,
and it's coming around again.
yep.
So I mean, it's needed. Yeah,
It's definitely needed. It's definitely something that we need to, as the world of aviation, it needs to be
I think
looked
it
at.
wasn't even the FAA that I think I was reading. I think I remember reading an article too that it's also even like airline CEOs are urging the current White House administration for the same thing. I mean, it's a needed. We need to cut down anything that helps, especially with the vastness of air travel. You know, it's a big deal, frankly.
Yeah, and we're not really going to get anywhere unless we've got government funding helping with that
Yeah.
and some government research.
Good news is with current administration and airline companies, the FAA. I think this new push will really move the quote unquote move the needle in the right direction. So
Yeah, I believe so. Speaking of lower emission or greener airplanes in general, Rolls Royce released an all electric stunt plane. It's like a stunt race plane body. It is
cool,
all electric. It's very fast. It is an extremely high torque electric. It does not have the flight range that a normal av fuel plane would have, but
of
the fact
course.
that it's up and down safely with a decent fly time and some pretty impressive numbers in an all
It's
electric
another step
platform,
forward.
that's another step in the right direction. Um, as far as that stuff goes, and maybe we'll talk in more depth about this at a later date. But there's been some huge market trends about people going to, like, say, Costco's Wheels Up membership, where flying private has become more or less the new flying first class.
Yeah, I mean pandemics. I remember I think I was reading that that's been a big trend during the pandemic. I mean, at the very least, it's less. You're not going through the monkey, the circus that you go through to sometimes at airports to get on commercial aircraft. So
And
who knows? It could be the new norm. I mean, this pandemic's changing a lot.
with a lot of these places offering discounts, or once you make the initial buy in,
Hmm.
the seats on a private jet costing the same as a first class ticket wherever you wanted to go has been extremely enticing.
Yeah, not to mention, I mean, safety. And I think there's been report. I think even we talked about it before, where private aviators go through even more flight hours than sometimes even commercial pilots do. So I think I remember us talking one of the like the first episodes we ever did here. We talked about that a little bit. this the first time you ever talk about aviation news. That's not to say what commercial pilots don't have
Commer-
oodles of hours,
yeah,
but I
commercial
mean,
pilots have an insane number of
but
hours.
I mean, private pilots have even more. I mean, potentially
Well,
depending on their flight record. So
right,
I mean,
and
it could be an increased safety thing. I mean, personability. I mean, there's probably a number of reasons this potential shift, this trend now.
yeah, and from a pilot's perspective, uh, being a private pilot pays a lot better than being a commercial pilot, provided you're on
Hmm.
a standard run route and you know this, that, and the other thing. So,
Yeah,
um, but
it's interesting.
definitely interesting. In the world of commercial aviation, two big updates out of Boeing this week. We saw last week the 777 out of Denver have the cowling blown off and
Yeah,
engine failure. The plane landed safely, no injuries, just a lot of very uh, nervous people on TikTok. So it opened up a huge investigation, and in the meantime, it appears to be the Pratt and Whitney engine that Boeing used during that time frame that
hmm
caused the significant um,
failure.
the significant
I mean,
failure.
it's an incredibly rare occurrence. Incredibly.
It's actually, well, okay, a
I've
rare
been reading some articles, and a lot of aviation experts have said that like that at least that kind of
that
particular
kind of
failure is
fan
very rare,
failure.
right?
Engine failures are not as uncommon as people think. Um, and that's not to say that they are common. They're
Hmm.
still very uncommon, but they're not as uncommon as people think. Most of the time, if there's an engine failure, though, the passengers aren't really notified about it or really even notice. Um, most of the time, if there's an engine failure, it might be a clogged fuel line or something like that.
Yeah, but it's
Um,
usually contained within the apparatus itself. That's
yeah,
the
it's not
design.
blowing the cowling apart and starting a fire. It's more or less, oh, it's not generating the thrust that it used to. But that's why we have two engines on every commercial airliner out there. There's always a double redundancy. So, with the exception of the 737 Max before it came out, before the changes were made. Now that being said, just as a safety precaution, Boeing did put out a notice to ground all of the first generation 777s with
Hmm.
that Pratt Whitney engine. That is not all 777s by any means. After the first year of production, or first 2 years possibly, they switched over to the GE90 General Electric turbofans. And those have not had any issues. Those are still up in the air. They are completely airworthy. So for those who are like, I'm never flying a Boeing again because of all these issues, they had the 737 Maxes, and now the 777s, and all these. It's an engine supplier issue. It's not actually a Boeing issue. And that being said, there's still a ton of those planes with the GE90s that are
Hmm.
way, way beyond safe to fly on. So, interesting update there. Another interesting
Yep.
update, Boeing 787s, the Dreamliners, as they're known, that's their model designation. Huge delays. They haven't, I don't think they delivered any models in 2020. And now in
Hmm.
2021, they still haven't delivered any models. For reference, they were delivering about 150, 200 a year in 2019. And the big issue there is the shims that they use to connect the two halves of the fuselage together. Apparently, they're not holding up very well. The supplier that they had, it's being investigated allegedly. Um, they may have lied about the integrity of the shims. So, um,
Interesting.
Not that it would cause any immediate danger, but obviously in the long term, as these planes would stay in service, the shims could potentially stretch and expand under pressurization, and the shims were not holding up the way they should to the stresses, and essentially could have a plane separate. So, um,
That's a big deal.
yeah, yep, very, very big deal. So,
What a world. What a
yeah.
world.
Speaking of their competition, Airbus has put out this week that they are putting more and more money into smaller XLR and commuter planes. The XLR, their extended long range, and then their commuter planes. So that we're looking more or less with their partnership with Bombardier on the A220 commuter jet,
Mm-hmm.
as well as their XLR, so their A321 XLR. They're also looking at an A320 Neo, which briefly you'll if you follow aviation news, you'll probably see two new types of planes, or two new naming conventions for Airbuses. There will be the Neo that we've started to
Yeah.
see as of recently, and then
Yeah.
there's the CEO, which is so NEO is the new engine option. The CO is the current engine option. You can still, I don't believe you can order them, but you can still obviously get parts for the COs out there, and there's still plenty of them available. They were produced up until very recently. Main difference, if you ever want to know if you're flying on a CO versus a Neo, the CO has very small triangular wingtips, while the Neos have the large shark fin wingtips. Um, Otherwise, externally, they look almost identical,
Mm-hmm.
and it comes down to the engines. One's got a more fuel efficient engine than the other. More fuel efficient means that it can fly for a longer range. And then finally, something that I personally found interesting, since August of last year when Microsoft Flight Simulator first came out, um,
This one.
aviation schools have seen un an unprecedented number of people reaching out and trying to get lessons. Now, during a pandemic, it is extremely hard to give flight lessons, being that you have to be in a cockpit with someone in a small aircraft for an extended period of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's been very difficult on a lot of flight schools to get lessons.
Yeah, but I mean, I
Abroad.
can attest. I had never played flight sim before. I've always had the interest. Someday I'll get my private license, but I can full personally see how this relates. Frankly, it's incredible. Hey, we were just talking about it before about the design of cockpits and planes and the complexity or not and how that's beautiful or whatever, right? But it makes sense, frankly, as more and more people, even as you get even I'd argue into flight sim with the many of the peripherals, and you just kept going deeper down the rabbit hole, as you're kind of as you started to get me to do, right, Nick? But it makes sense, frankly. I think it's awesome. You know,
Yeah, absolutely. So,
there's no I think there's nothing I've never flown an aircraft yet in my life. I will someday, but I can't say that as a kid. I've always loved flying through the air and just the technological achievement of that, frankly. And it's going to be cool for a new generation and even more pilots to step into the air, frank, or not step into the air, but maybe flap their wings and fly.
we'll take a step towards earning their wings, is how
Yeah,
I would say, and it's cool. I think
it's kind of cool.
for me
Yeah,
personally, I would
video
love
game.
to see more and more people get their pilot's license. It's an incredible experience, and it's something. As long as you keep it up,
Hmm.
it's just another thing to add to, even a resume. It takes a lot of time and dedication to get your license. And that's something that's huge. So, um,
Yeah.
like I said, I know we're running behind on time, so I don't want to stick around on this too much longer. So what do you want to jump right into our fuel for thought?
Sure, I only have one thing for today. Something I think we've kind of been holding for a while, just maybe get some thoughts on. As we both have, collector cars, very different collector cars, right? But there's,
Yeah,
I think we're right on the cusp of either a millennial or a Gen Z, right? With being born in the years we were.
depends on who you ask, but yes.
Depends on who you ask. So for the purposes of this talk here, I think I'll say I'm a millennial, right? And millennials apparently are having a surprising impact on car collecting. Now, the car collecting hobby has taken, a hit like anything else, I think, during the coronavirus pandemic with the auto industry in general. But from what I've been reading about just on the industry and, keeping tabs on, car collecting hasn't taken as much of a hit as the traditional auto industry. There was a lot less of, buying cars and selling cars, I guess, during, 2020 and so on. Doesn't look like that has also happened as much with collector cars. Values of cars changed wildly during the pandemic as well, but collector cars haven't seen, those same value changes because people hold on to stuff, or if anything, things might get a little bit more rare. But apparently, millennials are into, based on what I've been reading, it seems like two genres, right? Seems like one of the genres is frankly the same kind of classic cars that, their parents, our parents or grandparents were quote unquote into. I can't like I think what boomers might be the actual term for the generation before us, right? But things like pony cars and late 70s muscle cars, and there's an article on Motor Authority that talks about it, and an analyst for I forget what group. His name is John Wiley. He's a senior data analyst for Haggard Evaluation Services. And it looks like based on their data for insurance quotes and so on, a lot of the same stuff that baby boomers were interested in is what millennials are interested in. That might sounds like part of that might be because of, back when during the gas crisis and so on, you didn't see a whole lot of, older, like SN95 generation Mustangs and things like that. But when you were in high school and like, when were we in high school, frankly? Probably like
To,
early 2000,
for
like
me, it was
late.
2009 to 2013.
Yeah, somewhere around then, like you might be seeing, a new BMW, M3 or a C5 Corvette or Mustangs and stuff like that. And it seems like a lot of that is the same kind of things that are popular with millennials. In addition, again, which I did not expect at all, like to be honest, is the same kind of stuff that we've been seeing all the time. You know, the 65 to 66 Ford Mustangs, the C3, C4 Corvettes, Dodge Challengers, like classic cool cars. Another genre seems like that's popular is the stuff we couldn't get here, which, stuff from I think Zach talked about this on one of his recent ish videos where it's not just classic cars here from the States, but it's also other cars, maybe cars that we had never got here in the States and were sold in Europe or Japan or something like that. And people are importing them, and those are also becoming, something that millennials really enjoy collecting, and we're seeing a rise in. But I just find it interesting. Something that shocked me. That doesn't shock me, frankly, right? But what did shock me is, Nick, that I have a '66 Mustang in the garage downstairs. I didn't expect another millennial, quote unquote, to think that was cool. They'd want, like, a BMW M3 or a newer generation Mustang or something like that. I did not expect old trucks and old cars like that to be, as popular, frankly.
Yeah, and I think I don't know, and for me, I guess for the sake of this being, as we're considering it a millennial, I didn't think that I would find the 1931 Ford Model A that we have
Hmm.
being nearly as fascinating and cool as it has ended up being. I mean that um, I had a lot of
Hmm.
really, and we've had extensive conversations about this. I had a lot of really good memories of that vehicle when my grandpa would take us um, to go get ice cream in it,
Yeah.
and
I remember you telling me stuff about that. Yeah.
it was fun. We always knew what was going to happen every time he picked us up. We always would go, and my dad would tell us, "No, you're not allowed to get ice cream and sugar." And then my grandpa would be like, "Oh, the car's driving itself," and then it would drive into the parking lot. And that was a fun memory. Every time we
Yeah.
had that car, it had Uga horn, and slowly over time, it had fallen into disrepair and not disrepair, but
Yeah.
it just needed a lot of work.
Well, and
The
then that
roof was
takes a lot of
starting
upkeep too, right? I mean,
right.
it's a collector car, especially a car like that, right? You got to be careful. You got to upkeep. But millennials, like our age, are the quote unquote people who have the money now, right? Like we're changing
Well,
buying
and for you,
demographics, and it seems
it's a
like
lot more of the investment in time
yeah.
and parts. The interesting thing about the Model A for me is it's so simple and it's
Hmm.
so easy to fix. So it was easy for
Yeah.
me to learn it and start working on it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, now that I know that and I kind of know my way around that, I would be very interested in seeing a classic air cooled Porsche is one of the things that's on my dream list of
I mean,
a
yeah,
car
I
that I would
think
love to collect.
another article that I was reading on this was saying that now that millennials are buying demographic and they're coming of age and blah 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 and investments and so on, that like I wouldn't like the Model A isn't an exotic car, right? Obviously, it's an or maybe it's not exotic in the depth like what you would think of quote exotic car, right? When it comes to
Right.
mind, but Saint neither would my convertible be, but it seems like a lot of the cars that like we grew up playing racing games and like I'll never forget was it Need for Speed Pursuit or something like play on the GameCube or like I
Oh,
mean
hot pursuit.
like I love that game and like I would think we're still doing like I know it's racing simulators and so on, but that love is still there. And the millennials I think are also now buying things like like exotic versions of the cars that we couldn't have in high school, couldn't afford as a high schooler, but now we have money, right? And people can afford these cars that they loved, or the cars that they grew up racing in games, like an air-cooled Porsche or stuff
Yeah.
like that. It's cool. I think every generation becomes the obviously it changes buying habits, but what strikes me is I guess about this concept is not that what I expected to see, but it's still the old stuff, right? The what I call like the classic stuff that's still popular, frankly. In addition to the cars that were cool back when we were in high school, right? I mean, I frankly didn't expect that, and I'll echo what you're saying too. I've ridden with you multiple times in the Model A. Like I'm surprised at the love that car gets because I just wouldn't expect along the same lines, people who are the age they are that love it and the story you tell me about and that I saw firsthand, something that's that old as well. It's
I
almost like the same thing.
when I was a young high school boy, I always thought that the best way to attract the opposite sex would be to drive a Lamborghini or a Ferrari.
Hmm.
No, it's a 1931 Ford Model A. I can't.
Yeah, it's
Every person that sees that car drive by instantly goes, "Oh, oh, what's that?"
well, and that might even be a rarity, but I think did you ever have the same rule that I had my grand me growing up is whenever you take the he had that my grandfather still has a couple, but was a big classic car collector and car shows, and I grew up on that as well. And he taught me that whenever you take the car out, whatever it be, right, that you can't come home until someone makes a good comment about the car. And I must say that
I did not have that
that
rule,
always
but
you didn't have that rule? I think it's a
no.
great rule, but I must say is you were never, almost at the end of a tank, before you got home. I gotta say, I can imagine even more so for the Model A, but at least for the stuff that he had that I would drive and old Pontiacs and old Chevy trucks and so on. it didn't take long for someone to make a comment, and oftentimes it was people making comments that you wouldn't think they'd be coming from, young kids, quote unquote, like millennials at the time, like high schoolers. I mean, all ages, frankly, and I think that's still happening, and it's just really cool. Like it's the classics, right? It's quality. It's something cool. So you recognize when something is unique, when something is cool, when something is vintage. Maybe might be the right word. Something that's
Yeah.
exotic and was cool back then, so it's cool now, kind of thing. And you could maybe have it back then, but now that you're a little older, you have a job and you're a little more stable, you're not in high school anymore, and you get to buy, a cool exotic car from, like the Japanese domestic market, or you get to buy a 70s, 60s Mustang, or even so, a Model A, something even that classic, right? And you get to enjoy it. And it's something cool. And the millennials are able, frankly, in large form and in large swaths too, as they make up like what 60, maybe probably 70% of the collector car market now, as the boomers are baby boomers are a big part of it, but
Well,
millennials
and the
now,
boomers are passing down
yeah, that
their
I didn't even think
cars
about
to
that.
our generation too.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, I inherited my car from a baby boomer.
yeah, as did I. I mean, as did I. I wonder what with the millennial impact on car collecting. Right? I wonder what the trends are going to be 2 generations down the line. Frankly, are we going to see the same kind of old pony cars and even old trucks and cool cars that we grew up in racing games with? Are those still going to be as popular even with the card collectors in the future? Because as at the very least, as people still pass those cars down, they might not seek them out, maybe, right, future generations, but what about the people passing those cars down? That's what you learn a car on, right, kind of thing.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe that's why there's still millennials are still so into things like pony cars and muscle cars and vintage SUVs and trucks. I mean, I don't know. I think it's cool.
It's definitely cool, and I'm very interested to see where things go. I am. I hope
Yeah.
that you know. I hope that the love for collecting and working on classic cars stays alive. I mean, obviously, it is with even the
Hmm.
generation under us. With take Zach for example. You know,
Was that Gen Z, right? It's the next one,
I believe
technically.
so.
Yeah.
But for him, he is essentially. I mean, he is completely restoring a 19. Well, it's a Frankenstein car at this point. It's
Yeah.
anywhere between a
Anyways,
1979 and 1985 Mazda RX-7 with a
yeah, but I
1987
I
motor,
mean,
maybe.
yeah, I'd
But
still say like that's still cool,
yeah,
cool old, vintagey,
it
like
well, it's
something
past
that you wouldn't
25 years. It's
expect maybe.
considered vintage.
What's that?
It's past 25 years old. It's considered vintage.
I mean, yeah, like I guess like when you think of like I guess technical definition of vintage versus like what comes to your mind, right? Like, you know, I don't know. I gotta be honest. When I think about the current generation, I think we've all joked about it. It was like the cars that are there nowadays. And I think even Zach's joked about some of his videos. You look at like all the cars look the same, right? Like all like the doors look the same, the body lines, sloping door handles. Like you look at one thing that threw me through a loop. So I can't remember who told me, but he told me to look at the door handles as you drive down the highway and the design of doors on a lot of cars, and they all look about the same. They all have the same sloping down angle, like, it's just so similar, same colors, same look. I mean, and you wonder when we're old and feeble and, can't get out of a chair, what are the collector cars gonna be? You know? I think what we might be seeing is it's still gonna be, at least in some small part, the really old stuff at that point, the 60s, 70s, 80s, that stuff I think will always be some amount of cool, frankly. It does worry me a little bit given current car design and, stuff like that, but I don't know. I didn't think we'd see this, frankly, but I'm happy to see that the cars I thought were cool as a kid and I grew up with in car shows are still popular for collector cars, among others in the millennial market. And I hope that trend continues, frankly. I really do. Because I'd hate to see these cars go away. There a lot of, back in the day, car design was something special.
Yeah. Well, and the idea behind aerodynamics, just watching
Yeah.
from like the 20s into the 30s into the 40s into the 50s and into
Yeah,
how did car
big old fins on Cadillacs might not be very aerodynamic, but man, did they look good.
yeah, and well
All the
that and,
chrome. I mean,
or look at the way the headlights are designed on, say, the Model A versus
yeah,
a later Ford V8, like a
yeah.
V8 Deluxe, is you start getting more round and you start getting that airflow design,
Mhm.
and it's interesting. It's definitely interesting, and I think the uniqueness of an older vehicle is extremely appealing to people who are
Mhm.
collecting.
Yeah, it seems like more than ever we want stuff that's different, right? We're all,
Well, yeah,
everything's
nobody
becoming
wants to
more and more
collect a
similar
2007
within
Pontiac.
passing years, and it seems like it's like that's why the Model A gets so much talk, or I mean, even something as unique as, well, I mean, I keep
Well,
going
yeah,
back to that, but
like
you
I was
know,
saying, nobody
yeah.
wants to collect a 2007 Pontiac G6 base model.
And I would argue that I don't think that will ever.
They
I don't think it would ever. It's there's nothing
nobody wants the cookie cutter.
that
Everybody
stands out,
wants,
right? I
yeah,
mean, there is some new car design that stands out. Don't get me wrong. It's just that you know, I don't know. I don't think nothing will really stand out as much as some of the cars at all. I think a good example is like I think the most collectible car. This might not be right. I still think one of the most collectible car in like private, in terms of numbers in is a 65 to 66 Ford Mustang, right? And like whenever I know that people have seen that car and grew up with that car and whatever, but every time that I drive the convertible around, it's a 66. It's like, you know, it's like even my favorite thing is some of the like my grandparents' age, and then they come up and they talk about you know, this might not be millennial generation, but they talk about how like it was their first car, like how that was like the one that they always wanted, like their first car, their first job. I'll never forget the best story I ever had about that car. I don't think you'll get these kinds of things with newer cars being collector cars. I can't imagine the stories you've gotten, right? But I was outside of Walgreens running some errands, just felt like driving the convertible that day. And I'll never forget that an older gentleman walks up to me and he asks, what model is it, what year is the car, and blah blah blah. I start telling him about it and stuff I recently done to it, and he starts telling me that he used to work in the factory that made the horses and barns for Ford models of that era, and just the stories that he was telling me. And for those who might not know, the horse and barn is on the 66 is the the Mustang emblem, and then the square rectangle that it sits inside of. It's called the barn on the front grill. And the stories he was telling me about the car back then was just something that I never thought I would get, frankly. And stuff like that helped me keep my love for collector cars, frankly. So I hope that continues. It seems like it is with millennials, but I hope it keeps on going. I really do, frankly. You know,
yeah,
I can't imagine the stories you've gotten. With something as
it,
if the '66 Mustang is classic. I mean, the Model A is on a whole.
yeah. But for the most part, I mean, the stories that I get are usually from the Model A Club, and it's a bunch of you know middle-aged to older gentlemen who have had
Mhm.
theirs forever. Um, it's gotten to a point for me where anytime I'm driving the Model A, the stories I get are not like, oh, I had one, or oh, I used to
Mhm.
know. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
they
just
before that
it's
time maybe.
genuine curiosity because people have seen it in books, but nobody's ever seen one in person.
That's
It,
cool. Yeah,
it's like I was watching something recently
it's like you
about
forget that it ever existed, right? It's kind of
well
like
but yeah, or they just didn't know it existed because a lot of the so younger kids, and I'm talking like kindergarten through fifth grade right now. If
mhm.
you ask them Like how mime taking a picture. To me, to mime taking a picture, I like click the button on a camera, right?
Yeah, me too. Yeah, two hands, square. Yeah.
Two hands square, click the button on the camera, the flash goes off.
Hmm.
To them, it's hold your phone up and push your thumb.
Yeah.
They don't know how to use a camera.
Oh, there's the constant joke saying that someone 3D printed the save icon and it's a floppy disk, and that actually existed.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it's interesting to see the way things change, and it's nice to see with at least car collecting that while some things change, some other things stay the same. You know, and
Right.
I think there's some beauty in not only progress and change, but also consistency in some of the older stuff. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. Well, that's all I have for I think for this week. Do you have anything else to talk about, Nick, or is that all we got? I think.
I think that's it.
Well, then I think with that, thanks for tuning in, everybody. That of course is wraps up on us. That's checkered flag rather on this week, the week of February 28th for the Red Line Resorts podcast. If you'd like to get involved or reach out to us in any way, you can email us at podcast@redlineresorts.com. Otherwise, all our social media handles are at Redline Resorts on all platforms. With that, sorry if we ran a little bit late talking about what we do, but we want to make sure you guys are informed. So we'll be back next week with another round of topics for you guys to hear us talk about, and hopefully you guys enjoy them. With that, I'm Nick, or sorry, wow, I was reading that wrong. I'm Matt. That's Nick, and we'll
Oh
see you
boy.
guys next week.
Have a good week, guys.